What'd you make of the news yesterday from the Pac-12 conference?
I like a fool, I decided to take yesterday off in effort to climb Mount Olympus. So as soon as I got back down from the mountain, I saw the press release from the Pac-12. I mean, we knew it was coming. I think for the sake of everybody in the conference, if they were to get the ball rolling, they needed to get started off on a foot eventually. And you know, luckily, I think everybody's on the same page in terms of how they're going to do this slow rollout. I think Utah has its own plan. As we saw yesterday, we're going to find out what that is sometime later this week. But June 15th is the date, and it seems like, I don't want to jinx anything, but it seems like we're getting there.
I think so, too, and I've changed my tune over the last couple of weeks. I kind of felt like we're going to have a season. I always felt like there was going to be football, but kind of felt for a while, Chris, back in March and even parts of April that I just didn't know when kids were going to be able to get to campus and what it was going to be, so I kind of felt like there would be a delayed start. I'm feeling more and more now that kids are back on campus in the month of June, and we're seeing schools start sessions earlier this fall. My sense now is, and again, I don't know for sure, but I think it's trending toward an on-time start. What about you?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we have to see first is how they integrate the local in-state kids and how long they're going to be able to be in the facilities before the university and the program green lights the return of the out-of-state kids, because, you know, Utah has plenty of both. They have plenty of kids who are from the state of Utah who live here full-time, but they also have kids who are not only all over the country, but all over the world. And that's going to be a crucial part of this whole thing, is when they can get the entire team comfortably back in the facility. I don't think it's going to be what it was before this pandemic hit. I think you're going to have to see a lot of staggered groups and whatnot once they get, you know, returned to campus. But I think that for me is going to be the huge, really qualifier to see how quickly they can get everybody back in town, and therefore working with Doug Ellisai and his staff in terms of getting back to peak fitness.
I kind of felt like the June 15th date was used intentionally for one of those reasons, as you said right there. That gives you a 3-week ramp up right now, Chris, to get those, to start beginning to make arrangements to get those kids back to campus. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I definitely think that makes sense. And I think more than anything, I wouldn't be surprised to see Utah implore what Kyle said a few weeks ago on some Zoom calls with the media. Said that, you know, I think the ideal would be able to get the in-state athletes in the facilities for a week or two to get them kind of accustomed to things, and then be able to get everybody back from wherever they are around the country or the world back to Salt Lake and kind of go from there.
Chris Camrani's with us here on the Bill Riley Show today. I almost feel like, and Mark Harlan kind of indicated, you know, a week or two ago when he was on with me, you know, June 1st to get the in-state kids back, and toward the end of June for the out-of-state kids. I kind of feel like that June 15th splits the difference. You get your in-state kids in the facility and on campus on June the 15th. I almost think you could look at 7 to 10 days later, maybe getting those out-of-state kids in, because you could begin to make those plans and arrangements right now and have that schedule. I'm sure they've got their schedule. I'm sure they've had plans A, B, and C on how they were going to get kids in and out of the facility, because you're going to have to stagger it. You're not going to have every athlete from every sport in there at one time, and you're not going to have every kid from football because you've got 85 kids probably in there at one time either. But my guess would be, if I had to hazard one, June 15th, you're letting the in-state kids in on some sort of a staggered schedule, and then maybe a week to 10 days later, your out-of-state kids are back on campus and you're integrating them in. And by that first week in July, you've got your schedule and your routine down, and everybody's on campus and everybody's doing conditioning. And if you're going to start on time, and again, that's what we're going to have to wait to see here in the next couple of weeks. If you're going to start on time, your kind of team conditioning stuff kind of has to start in mid-July. If they want those 6 weeks ramping up, well, normally you've got 4 with the beginning of August, but if you want those 6 weeks, you're probably going to have to start your team activities. And that doesn't mean practice. I think it means team activities, almost kind of like a pseudo-spring, somewhere between spring football and fall camp. You're probably going to have to begin that in mid-July, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the underrated part of this whole thing so far is we're going to have to figure out when the 2020 class that was planning to join this summer is able to join the team, because now this year, more than any other year in recent history, Utah was planning on being reliant on so many brand new 18, 19-year-old freshmen to not only contribute to vice spots. And this is going to be a huge subtext to this whole rollout is, when can Utah get the Xavier Carltons and Van Fillingers and Nate Ritchies and Money Parks? When can these kids get to Utah for the first time and, get enrolled? I mean, I'm sure they're enrolled in their online classes, but when can those guys really start to be incorporated in the mix? Because those guys are needed. And to me, it's a fascinating subplot to this whole thing.
Yeah, my inkling would be, though, Fillinger and Carlton and those guys, or Charlton, they're in-state guys. So my guess would be, because they would be coming in, they would be allowed to return maybe when the in-state guys return. But that's only for conditioning. When do you get on the field with those guys is the bigger question, right?
No, for sure. But I think with how kind of sticky this pandemic has been with the NCAA and their putting the foot down, so to speak, on making sure everybody abides by the rules, we'll have to seek, some clarification from Kyle and maybe Mark, if we're able to talk to him soon, about when, these 2020 signees are able to participate in activities full time. Because again, this is going to be unlike any Utah football season in recent history when it comes to being uberly reliant on some very talented young kids that are going to need to deliver.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to make of young kids in a stable program versus returning kids in an unstable program. When you look at places like USC, which is loaded with talent, but he flipped his coaching staff over last year, and those coaches have had no time with any of those players. Where at Utah, they have had continuity upon continuity. But they've got it's going to be an interesting case study this fall with such limited time to see what it's kind of that chicken or the egg argument. What's more important, the uber talent but no relationship with coaching, or is it the culture that integrates and knows how to work with that talent that might be a little less experienced?
No, for sure. And I think your interview with Sharif Shah last week had a pretty good peek into what that is going to look like when everything, if goes according to plan, if everything gets going. Sharif told you, there's going to be no time. It's going to be, we're going to have to figure things out in a week, or else they're going to be behind the eight ball. And I think that's going to go for pretty much every positional group, because there are a bunch of new guys that are going to be starting in new spots, and there are a bunch of guys that are returning in important spots. So it's going to be interesting to see how quickly the guys that have been in the program can help the new guys along, and how the new guys can get assimilated. Because again, that interview with Sharif for me really peeled back the onion in terms of how things are going to have to be expedited when things get going again.
Well, I think we're going to find out, too, who was in their playbook. And I think everybody's in it, but who's really in their playbook? Who's going Clark Phillips and studying other teams' wide receivers versus guys that are just looking at their own playbook? I think that's going to, the guys that are really in that playbook and that can really pick that stuff up and assimilate quickly. This fall, there's just not going to be time. If you're not getting it on the first couple of reps, you're to the end of the line, and they're going to give more reps to the guys that are picking it up quickly.
For sure. And I know we've talked about this ad nauseum the last few months about how this could be the year that Utah decides to maybe turn it loose a little bit offensively because of the amount of firepower they have coming back at the skill position spots, and you return 4 out of your 5 offensive linemen. But again, the biggest question, I think, even more so than the 9 defensive starters you have to replace, is who's going to be QB1. And I think that's going to be it's going to be a tough one for Andy and Kyle and everybody in those offensive rooms, because they're going to have to get that thing sorted out ASAP. I mean, you mentioned who's had their nose buried in their books. I'm sure all those quarterbacks have, and it's going to be it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough sledding to figure out who's going to be the first QB eliminated from that race when they're able to actually get back in the pads and get on the practice field.
Here's the thing that I've been looking around the conference a lot and kind of doing some studying on other teams. Here's what I've come to the conclusion of. There's not a definitive really good team in the conference. I think last year there were 3 definitive teams that you could put your finger on and say, okay, and then it kind of got whittled down to 2. I don't know who definitively. I mean, I think it's probably Oregon, but they have to replace their entire offensive line, save Penny Sewell, who, again, is really good, and a quarterback and some guys. You know, Washington's got a lot of guys back from last year, but they're having to integrate a new quarterback and a new head coach. You know, Cal's returning a ton, but they lost some key players. And, you know, everybody talks about that team bringing the quarterback back. But, you know, Chase Garbers was good, but he wasn't great necessarily last year. And they didn't really beat anybody of note outside of Washington. Washington didn't turn out to be good. SC, who knows? They've got a lot of talent, but coaches. Utah's got a great culture and high-octane offense, but the defense, which is usually – I mean, I just look around the conference, Chris, and I think in addition to this pandemic and the short window of practice, this year's going to be crazy. I mean, I don't know what to make of this league, and we could see a lot of different things happen this year.
Yeah, it is definitely up for grabs, I think. I think the early leaders in the clubhouse in each division for me are SC in the South, just because of the amount of firepower they have coming back. And we saw what that offense can be when Keaton Slovis is healthy. And obviously they lose Michael Pittman. But, man, they've got a lot of dudes down there on the outside still. And they're going to be – if Slovis can stay healthy, I think they could be a problem in the South. I think they're the front runners for me. And in the North, I'm with you on Oregon. I think, obviously, you have the anchor in Panay on the left side, but you do have to replace a top 6 draft pick in Justin Herbert and a lot of guys that they lost. But Oregon did reload on defense with a lot of impressive signees in the 2020 class. And if we've seen anything during this Cristobal era, he's turned out to probably be the best recruiter in the conference in such a short amount of time. His connections around the country, I think, are really starting to pay off for the Ducks, especially in the recruiting realm.
Yeah, I think that combined with the Oregon brand and Nike really are strong for them. But you know, to me, they're going to hang their hat on their defense this year, I mean, how many times have we said that with Oregon? Not very often.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to be really, really good defensively, and I think that it could take a while for them to get around on offense. Yeah,
no, totally. I mean, are they going to have the Boston College kid, you know, win that starting job, or some of the other guys that they have in the program? You're waiting for the Pac-12 to have a year where it's, I guess if we're looking in recent history, I think last year was the year that the Pac-12 was as top-heavy as it's been in a long time, with Oregon and Utah at the top. But this year, it's the amount of players that those teams lost to the draft. It's going to be interesting. I don't want to say it's completely up for grabs, because I think there are clear front runners. But as we know in the Pac-12, you know, anybody can beat anybody. The cannibalization is always a potential on any given Friday or Saturday. So I think we're going to be in for a treat in terms of the unpredictability once again. I know that doesn't do much for Pac-12's national footprint in the college football playoff discussion, but I think there's a reason why people like staying up till 1 and 2 a.m. on the East Coast watching those crazy games.
I understand both sides of those arguments. I do. And you know, it's all about winning and being on that big stage. And in that sense, the Pac-12 has failed. But I'll be honest, Chris, and I say this all the time, 1 through 12, from a competitive standpoint, I think it could be the most competitive conference week in and week out in the country. And again, that doesn't help you on the national landscape. But when you're going to a game as a fan, you know, I feel like you're getting really good football. I don't know that you can always say that in the SEC or the Big Ten or the Big 12. But I think in the Pac-12, it's really good. It's not great all the time, but it's really good competitive football.
Yeah, and I think what the Pac-12 needs, and this is, you know, maybe dreaming too big, but you need those upsets of those really big-time schools. I mean, you need Colorado to beat USC and have it be a big deal, and then you need to have Colorado be good. You don't need Colorado to beat SC in an upset and then have them lose to Oregon State the following week, which is very, very common in the Pac-12, Bill. You know that. I'm just saying, like, I think it's kind of small potatoes, but in my mind, things like that could go really far for the Pac-12, and I know that's dreaming big, like I said. But being maybe win over casual fans across the country by a certain style of play. I think you saw that with Utah last year. I think a lot of people were enthralled by the way Utah's defense played and with the way Zach Moss ran the ball and the way Tyler Huntley was one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in the country. You need more of those teams to be able to win people over, I think, just on a week-to-week basis, as opposed to, maybe this team upset a contender, then in the next week they fall off the map and we never hear from them again.
All right, last thing for you, then I'll cut you loose. What's the next big domino you're waiting to see fall, or the next big bit of news? We know kids are coming back to campus. Is it, the announcement of when practice can begin, team activities can begin? Is it an announcement about the season? What's the next big one for Chris Camrani?
Yeah, I think it's practice. Practice is announced. I think we need to see these guys back in town, in the facility. Like we mentioned, they're going to be staggered, so they're not going to be all there together, but they need to be there, I think, for at least a few weeks to understand that they can be together again without worries of a potential little spike. Obviously, we're all a little paranoid, and rightfully so, but I think everybody needs to see that the start of the plan can be fruitful, and they're not going to be set back, in a sense, if that makes sense. Like, they need to feel positive about going through this first phase. How
was the hike, by the way? Probably didn't feel like riding anything once you got down, did you?
Oh, I'm dead. No, it was my first time, and my legs are throbbing. It was worth it, though. It's amazing. I mean, got my tan on, so I'm tan for the year, so I'm set there. But it was a treat. If anybody is willing to not waste a day, but use a day, it was definitely a day off that I used. It was fun. I don't know. Have you done it before?
I haven't. Mount Olympus is on the bucket list. What did it take you? About 4 to get up and 3 to get down, or what?
3.5 to get up, 2.5 to get down.
Okay.
So it's you gain about 4,100 of elevation over the last 3 miles.
Oh.
So it's yeah. It got to the point now that like running down felt longer than actually going up, because you think like, how did we do this? But it was awesome. I mean, just being up there, it's one of those things where you kind of want to be an elitist and be like, man, I hope people forget how cool Utah is.
Yeah, don't move here. Come visit, but don't move here. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks, Bill.
See you later.